The stagecoach lurched violently, throwing Clara Hensley against the worn leather seat. She gripped her medical bag tighter, the same bag that had served her through 3 years of tending wounded soldiers. Now it held everything she owned worth keeping: bandages, laudanum, her mother's silver scissors, and a daguerreotype she no longer looked at. "Road's getting worse," the driver shouted over the grinding wheels. "Mountain pass ahead ain't been maintained since the railroad went through." Clara nodded, though he couldn't see her. She'd paid extra for this route to Wyoming Territory precisely because few traveled it. The fewer people who knew where Clara Hensley had gone after breaking her engagement to Robert Thornton, the better. Let Kansas society gossip about the woman who'd refused to marry the banker's son after discovering his visits to certain establishments on the wrong side of town. The October wind cut through the coach's canvas sides like accusations. She pulled her wool cloak tighter, remembering her sister's parting words, "You're 27. Clara, this is foolishness. Where will you go? What will you do?" "Live," Clara had answered. "Finally live." Thunder rolled across the darkening sky. The horses whinnied nervously as the path narrowed. Mountain on one side, a steep drop on the other. Clara had seen enough accidents to recognize danger the driver was pushing too hard, trying to make the next way station before the storm hit. The wheel hit something, a boulder, a washed-out section. She never knew. The coach tilted, balanced for one terrible moment, then crashed onto its side. Clara's world became a chaos of splintering wood, her bag flying from her hands, her shoulders slamming into the doorframe. When stillness came, she found herself crumpled against what had been the coach's side, now its floor. Rain began pattering against the canvas above her. "Sir," she called to the driver, "are you hurt?" Scrambling sounds outside. The driver's face appeared in the window above her, blood trickling from his forehead. "Can you climb out, ma'am?" "Yes." She'd climbed out of worse places: field hospital tents under fire, a burning supply wagon. This was merely inconvenient. He helped pull her up and out into the gathering storm. The coach lay like a wounded animal across the narrow track. One wheel spun lazily in the air. Their 2 horses stood trembling but uninjured, still in their traces. "I'll unhitch the horses," the driver said, not meeting her eyes. "Ride to Murphy's station. Get help." "Both of us can ride," Clara said. "Only got one saddle in the boot. Ma'am, coach company's property." He was already moving. Decision made. "You stay with the coach. I'll be back by morning with help." "Sir, But he was already working at the harnesses with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, he'd saddled the steadier mare and mounted. "There's a buffalo robe in the boot. Some hardtack and jerky, too. Start a fire if you can. I'll be back quick as I can." Then he was gone, hoofbeats fading into the storm's growing fury, leaving Clara alone with an overturned coach and a lame horse that couldn't carry her weight. She stood in the rain, watching the darkness swallow him, and laughed a short, bitter sound. Men, always so certain they knew best. The rain turned earnest now, cold and stinging. Clara retrieved her medical bag from the coach's interior, grateful to find it intact. The buffalo robe was where promised, along with the food. She managed to flip one of the coach seats out to create a small shelter against the overturned vehicle, draping the canvas to keep off the worst of the rain. Fire was impossible in this weather. She huddled under the robe, chewing tasteless jerky, and tried not to think about wolves, or bears, or the dozen ways a woman alone might meet her end in these mountains. Full darkness had settled when she heard the soft sound of horse hooves on wet ground. Her heart lifted, then sank. Too soon for the driver to have reached help and returned, and only one horse by the sound of it. Clara reached into her medical bag, fingers finding the small pistol she'd carried since the war. A lady's gun. Robert had called it dismissively, but it had saved her life twice in field hospitals when deserters came looking for morphine. The hoofbeats stopped. She heard the creak of leather, Someone dismounting. A tall figure materialized from the rain and darkness, moving with the careful grace of someone accustomed to treacherous ground. "Ma'am?" A man's voice, low and rough as bark. "You hurt." She kept the pistol hidden but ready under the robe. "Who are you?" He stepped closer, and lightning illuminated him briefly tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long duster that had seen better days. Dark hair hung past his collar, and several days' worth of beard shadowed his jaw. Everything about him spoke of the wilderness, from his mud-caked boots to the rifle slung over his shoulder. "Cole Maddox," he said. "Saw the coach tracks going off the road about a quarter-mile back." His eyes took in her makeshift shelter. "Driver, go for help." "Yes." She studied him, this stranger who'd appeared from nowhere. "Are you from Murphy's station?" "No, ma'am, just passing through." He looked at the overturned coach, then back at her. "Storm's getting worse. You can't stay here." "I'm quite capable of..." "That buffalo robe won't keep you warm when the temperature drops tonight, and this spot's a natural runoff. When the real rain hits upstream, water'll come through here like a river." He gestured to the darkness. "Got a place about an hour's ride. Nothing fancy, but it's dry." "I don't know you, Mr. Maddox?" "No, ma'am, you don't." He took a step back, hands visible and empty. "But I know hypothermia when I see it coming. Your lips are already going blue." She hadn't realized she was shivering. The cold had crept in gradually, numbing her fingers, making her thoughts sluggish. Her nurse's training recognized the truth in his words. "I'm offering shelter, nothing more," he continued. "You'll be on your way come morning when your driver returns." Pride warred with pragmatism. Pride had kept her in Kansas too long, had made her endure whispers and pitying looks. Pragmatism had finally driven her west. "Very well," she said, standing. Her legs, stiff with cold, nearly betrayed her. He caught her elbow, steadying her with surprising gentleness. "Can you ride?" "Of course." He retrieved her bag while she folded the buffalo robe. His horse stood patient in the rain, a rangy bay that looked like it could run forever. Cole swung up into the saddle with an economy of motion that spoke of a lifetime on horseback, then reached down for her. This was the moment: trust this stranger or spend the night alone in a flood-prone gulch. Clara had made harder choices in surgical tents with shells exploding overhead. She took his hand. He pulled her up in front of him, her back against his chest, his arms coming around her to hold the reins. She stiffened at the improper closeness. "Relax," he said quietly. "Storm's going to get worse before it gets better. Need you to stay on the horse." He was warm, solid, alive in a way Robert had never been. With his soft banker's hands and cologne-scented clothes, this man smelled of leather and wood smoke and rain. They rode in silence, broken only by thunder and the horse's steady gait. True to his word, the storm intensified, turning the trail into a muddy stream. More than once, she was grateful for his steady presence, keeping her secure in the saddle. An hour passed, maybe more. Before shapes emerged from the darkness, a small cabin backed against a hillside. A lean-to stable beside it, simple, isolated, but blessedly solid-looking. Cole dismounted first, then helped her down. Her legs buckled slightly, and again he steadied her. "Go on inside," he said, already leading his horse to the stable. "Door's not locked. I'll see to the horse." The cabin was Spartan, but clean: one room with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed in the corner, a table with 2 chairs, shelves holding supplies. Everything neat, organized, solitary. A drifter's way station, not a home. She was examining the banked coals in the fireplace when he entered, bringing cold air and rain with him. He shed his duster, hanging it on a peg, and she saw the gun belt he wore, the Colt riding low on his hip in the manner of men who lived by them. "I'll get the fire going," he said, not commenting on her scrutiny. Soon, warmth began to push back the cold. He heated water, made coffee, set out biscuits and dried apple slices. Thank you, Clara said, wrapping her hands around the hot tin cup. He nodded, saying nothing. She studied him in the firelight, younger than she'd first thought. Maybe 35, with dark eyes that gave nothing away. A scar ran through his left eyebrow. Another marked the back of his right hand, violence written on his body like a map of hard years. "The stagecoach driver," she said eventually. "Will he be able to find us here when he returns?" "I'll ride out at first light. Leave markers so he can find the turnoff." Cole stared into the fire. "Though if he's smart, he won't come back at all. Not his fault the coach went over. Company won't pay him to rescue one passenger." Clara's heart sank. She'd suspected as much, but had hoped. "Where were you headed?" he asked. "Cheyenne. Eventually. I'm a nurse. Heard they need medical help in the territories." "They do." He refilled her coffee. "Also need women willing to marry sight unseen, dance hall girls, and laundresses. Which are you really?" Heat flashed through her. "I told you, I'm a nurse." "With hands that soft traveling alone running from something, I'd wager." She set down her cup harder than necessary. "And you? What are you running from, Mr. Maddox?" His smile was humorless. "Everything, ma'am. That's why I keep moving." They stared at each other across the table. Two strangers measuring wounds that didn't show. "You can have the bed," he said finally. "I'll take the floor by the fire." "I couldn't." "You could and you will." He stood, ending the discussion. "I'll check the horse once more. There's a nightshirt in the trunk if you want something dry to sleep in." He shrugged back into his duster and stepped out into the storm. Clara sat alone, listening to the rain pound the roof, and wondered what morning would bring. The driver might return, or he might not. She was miles from anywhere with a man who wore his gun like others wore watches, who admitted to running from everything. But he'd offered her shelter without condition, had given her the bed, was even now checking on horses in a storm. She'd known supposedly good men who'd done far worse things. When Cole returned, she was already in the bed, wearing the too large nightshirt, her clothes drying by the fire. He built up the flames, laid out his bedroll near the hearth, and settled down fully clothed except for his boots. "Mr. Maddox," she said into the darkness. "Ma'am, what you said about running from everything, does that include me?" A long pause. "Get some sleep, Miss Hensley. Storm will pass by morning." But she lay awake a long time, listening to rain and wind and the steady breathing of a man who'd warned her wordlessly. "Don't get close. Don't expect anything. Don't follow when morning comes." She should have listened. She really should have listened. Clara woke to silence. No rain drumming the roof, no wind rattling the shutters. Pale morning light filtered through the single window, revealing an empty cabin. Cole's bedroll lay folded neatly by the cold fireplace. His duster was gone from the peg. She dressed quickly in her still damp clothes and stepped outside. The storm had passed, leaving crystal air and puddles that reflected the sky. Cole stood by the stable, saddling his horse with methodical precision. A second horse, the lame one from the coach, waited nearby, looking better for a night's rest. "Morning," he said without turning. "Coffee's on the stove." She poured herself a cup, watching him work. Everything about his movement spoke of leaving the careful way he packed his saddlebags, the thorough check of his rifle, the way he avoided looking at the cabin. "Found your driver's tracks heading north," he said finally. "He made it through the storm. Doubt he's coming back." Clara had suspected as much. "Then I suppose I'll need to walk to the nearest town." "That'd be Timber Hollow. 3 days on foot through rough country." He adjusted a stirrup. 2 days if you knew the trails, which you don't. Then I'll manage as best I can." He turned then, studying her with those unreadable dark eyes. "Coach horse can carry you, but she's not trail-wise. You'll end up lost, or worse. Are you offering to guide me, Mr. Maddox?" "No." The word came quick and firm. I'm heading the opposite direction. Got business that won't wait. She lifted her chin. Then I thank you for your hospitality and will be on my way. He muttered something under his breath that might have been a curse. Wait here. He disappeared into the cabin, returning with a rough map sketched on brown paper. Follow the creek downstream until you hit the lightning-struck pine. Bear left at the fork. Keep the mountain on your right. When you see 3 boulders that look like sleeping bears, you're close to town. Clara took the map, their fingers brushing briefly. He pulled back as if burned. Don't follow the deer trails. He continued. They'll lead you in circles. Don't cross any water deeper than your knees. And if you see fresh bear sign, backtrack and go around. I understand. Do you? His voice roughened. This isn't Kansas, Miss Hensley. The territory doesn't forgive mistakes. Neither did the war, Mr. Maddox. I survived 3 years in field hospitals. I imagine I can manage a 2-day walk. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe, or respect. You were in the war. Assistant nurse, 12th Kansas Infantry, Antietam to Appomattox. She didn't mention the nightmares that still came, the faces of boys who died calling for their mothers. We all have our histories. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, pack light. Take only what you need. I'll leave the coach horse, she's no good to me. And you already paid her fare. Before Clara could respond, he swung into his saddle. The morning sun caught the silver conchos on his horse's bridle, the worn grip of his pistol, the hard lines of his face. There's a woman in Timber Hollow, he said. Mrs. Eleanor Hutchins runs the boarding house. Tell her Cole sent you. She'll give you a fair room and honest work if you need it. Mr. Maddox Cole, I don't know how to thank you. Don't follow me, he said. That's thanks enough. He touched his hat brim and rode away, heading south into the timber. Clara watched until the forest swallowed him, then went to pack her few belonging. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The journey to Timber Hollow tested every skill Clara had learned in the war. The coach horse was willing but nervous, starting at every sound. The trails Cole had mapped were clear enough in the morning, but afternoon shadows made landmarks uncertain. She camped the first night under an overhang of rock, building a small fire the way she'd seen him do it, banked low, sheltered from wind. She ate sparingly from the supplies he'd left: jerky, hardtack, dried fruit. The darkness beyond her fire circle was absolute, filled with sounds that might have been wind or might have been wolves. Sleep came in fragments, broken by the horse's restless movements and her own memories. Not of the war this time, but of dark eyes and careful hands, of a man who'd offered shelter and asked for nothing, who'd ridden away like smoke on the morning air. Don't follow me, he'd said. The words echoed with each hoofbeat the next day as she picked her way down increasingly treacherous trails. By late afternoon of the second day, exhaustion clouded her judgment. The map showed the 3 bear-shaped boulders should be close, but she'd seen nothing resembling them. The horse favored her right front leg again, and Clara's water was running low. Then she saw at fresh tracks in the muddy trail, horse hooves, recently made, heading the same direction she traveled. Her heart jumped irrationally. But no, Cole had gone south. These could belong to anyone. She followed them anyway, having no better guide, and within an hour saw smoke rising above the trees, then rooftops, then the blessed sight of Timber Hollow spreading across a valley. Larger than she'd expected, with a main street and church steeple and all the signs of civilization. The boarding house wasn't hard to find, a 2-story clapboard with Hutchins Boarding House painted in neat letters. Clara tied the exhausted horse to the hitching post and knocked. The woman who answered was perhaps 50, with steel-gray hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She took in Clara's travel-stained appearance, the medical bag, the coach horse with its stage line brand. So, Mrs. Hutchins Cole Maddox said you might have a room. The woman's expression shifted subtly. Did he now? And where did you encounter Mr. Maddox? He helped me when the stage overturned in the storm, gave me shelter and directions here. Mrs. Hutchins stepped aside. Come in then. You look dead on your feet. Room's $1 a week. 2 meals a day included. No gentlemen callers after 8 o'clock. No liquor, no loud behavior. Can you abide by that? Yes, ma'am. Can you pay? Clara had sewn her savings into the lining of her corset, a habit from the war. I can pay for a month in advance. I'm also a trained nurse, if you know anyone needing medical help. A nurse? Interest sharpened the older woman's gaze. Well now, that changes things. Doctor, Holcomb's been poorly lately, his rheumatism. Might be he could use help. And there's always someone needing tending in a town like this. She showed Clara to a small but clean room overlooking the back garden. Iron bedstead, washstand, chair, and small wardrobe. After 2 nights in the wilderness, it looked like paradise. Supper's at 6, Mrs. Hutchins said. You'll want to clean up first. Pump's in the kitchen, and there's hot water on the stove. I'll see to your horse. Thank you. May I ask, how do you know Cole Maddox? The landlady paused at the door. Everyone knows Cole. One way or another. Comes through every few months, stays a night or 2, moves on. Been that way for near 3 years now. Where does he go? Here and there. He guides hunting parties sometimes, tracks for the cavalry when they're chasing rustlers. Mans the outlying line shacks in winter when other cowboys won't. She studied Clara with those sharp eyes. He's not a man for settling, if that's what you're wondering. Some men walk to forget. Best let him. After she left, Clara unpacked slowly, hanging her spare dress in the wardrobe, setting her mother's scissors on the small shelf. From the window, she could see the mountains rising in the distance, dark with timber. Somewhere in those hills. A man rode alone because he chose to. Don't follow me, he'd said. Sound advice. Sensible advice. She'd come west to start fresh, not to pine after a drifter who'd made his feelings clear. Timber Hollow had possibilities. She could build something here. Create the independent life Kansas society would never have allowed. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Days passed, then weeks. Clara established herself quickly in the small community. Dr. Holcomb, a wheezing man of 70. Gladly accepted her help with his practice. She assisted with births, set broken bones, treated everything from mining accidents to childhood fevers. The townspeople, initially suspicious of a single woman with medical training, gradually warmed to her competent hands and no-nonsense manner. She rented a small room behind the general store to see patients, paying for it by helping Mrs. Chen, the proprietor's wife, with her English. She joined the church auxiliary, not from faith but for respectability. She made friends with the other boarders at Mrs. Hutchins is a schoolteacher from Ohio, 2 widowed sisters who ran the bakery, a young woman named Sarah who worked at the hotel and dreamed of San Francisco. But sometimes, walking back from a late call, she'd catch herself studying the tree line. Sometimes, hearing hoofbeats on Main Street. Her pulse would quicken until she saw it was only the mail carrier or a ranch hand coming to town. He was here last week, Sarah mentioned one evening over dinner. Cole Maddox stayed one night at Murphy's camp outside town. Tom Brennan saw him buying supplies. Clara kept her voice carefully neutral. Oh. Tom says he looked rough, thinner than usual, like he'd been living hard even for him. Sarah lowered her voice. Tom also says there were men asking after him the next day, wearing badges. Mrs. Hutchins shot Sarah a warning look. That's enough gossip. Girl, mister. Maddox's business is his own. But Clara couldn't stop thinking about it. Men with badges meant law trouble. Was that what he was running from? What had driven him to this solitary existence? Riding the territories with winter coming on. 3 nights later, she was returning from treating a difficult birth at the Jameson farm when she saw the tracks, fresh horse prints in the frost-touched mud. leading off the main trail toward the creek. Something about them seemed familiar, the slightly deeper impression of the left rear hoof, the spacing that suggested a tall horse with a smooth gait. Her medical bag grew heavy in her hand. She should continue to town. She had patients to see tomorrow, a life she was building piece by careful piece. Following strange tracks into the darkness was foolish, dangerous. "Don't follow me." But her feet had already turned toward the creek trail. Just to see, she told herself. Just to know if her suspicions were right. She'd come too far to still be the woman who did what she was told. The tracks led to a small clearing where someone had made a cold camp, no fire. Just a horse tethered to graze and a bedroll under the pines. A man sat with his back against a tree, rifle across his knees, hat tilted low. He spoke without looking up. "Your footsteps are too heavy for a deer, too light for a bear. That leaves human. And most humans with honest business don't creep around in the dark." "I wasn't creeping," Clara said. His head came up then, and even in the moonlight she could see his surprise. "Miss Hensley." He rose slowly, stiffly, and she noticed how he favored his left side. "You lost?" "No, I was returning from a call and saw your tracks." "And followed them." His voice held something between amusement and irritation. "Thought I made myself clear about that." "You did, yet here we are." They stared at each other across the small clearing. He looked exactly as Sarah had described, leaner, worn down, like a man pushing too hard for too long. The badge-wearing men worried her more now that she saw him. "You're hurt," she said. "I'm fine. You're favoring your left side and moving like a man with bruised ribs at the very least. When did it happen?" "Leave it be." But she was already moving forward, her nurse's instincts overriding caution. "I have medical supplies. Let me look." "No." She stopped just out of reach. "Then I'll stay here and watch you suffer. Your choice, Mr. Maddox." He laughed, short and sharp. "Stubborn woman. No wonder you survived the war." "Among other reasons. Now, will you let me help, or shall we stand here all night?" Slowly, reluctantly, he sat back down and unbuttoned his coat. His shirt beneath was dark, with dried blood along the left side. Clara knelt beside him, gently pulling the fabric away from what proved to be a long, shallow cut along his ribs, painful but not life-threatening if kept clean. "Knife?" she asked, already pulling supplies from her bag. "Tree branch. Horse spooked and threw me into some deadfall." She cleaned the wound by moonlight, working with the same steady efficiency that had saved lives in field hospitals. He held still, breathing carefully, watching her face. "Why aren't you in town?" she asked. "Mrs. Hutchins would have given you a room." Towns have eyes. Sometimes a man needs to not be seen. "The men with badges." His silence was answer enough. She finished binding the wound with strips of clean linen. "This needs checking daily. You should—" "I'll be gone by dawn." "Of course you will." She sat back on her heels. "Running seems to be what you do best." "Surviving is what I do best," he corrected. "Running's just the method." She packed her supplies, aware of him watching her every movement. When she stood to go, he caught her wrist gently. "Why did you follow the tracks?" "Clara." Her name on his lips stopped her breath. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." She pulled free. "Maybe I'm tired of men telling me what I should and shouldn't do. Maybe I'm curious about what makes a man choose solitude over society. Or maybe I just wanted to see if you were all right." "I'm always all right." "No," she said softly. "You're not, but then neither am I." She left him there in his cold camp, walking back to town with steady steps. She didn't look back, though she felt his gaze following her until the trees hid them from each other. In the morning, she knew, he would be gone. The clearing would hold only pressed grass and cold ashes, as if he'd never been there at all. She would continue building her new life, treating patients, earning respect, creating the independence she'd craved. But now she knew something else. 2. He came through Timber Hollow regularly. He knew where she was, and despite his warnings, despite his walls, he'd let her tend his wounds and spoken her name like a prayer in the darkness. Some women might call that hope. Clara preferred to call it a beginning. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing Timber Hollow in snow by late November. Clara had settled into her routine's morning calls with Dr. Holcomb, afternoons in her makeshift clinic, evenings at the boarding house where she'd earned her place at the communal table through quiet competence and steady kindness. She hadn't seen Cole Maddox since that night by the creek. Sometimes she wondered if she'd dreamed the encounter, but the blood-stained cloth she'd tucked away proved otherwise. Mrs. Hutchins mentioned he'd been spotted heading toward the mining camps up north, guiding supplies through the early snow, a dangerous job that paid well precisely because most men wouldn't risk it. December brought a blizzard that trapped the town for 3 days. When it cleared, Clara was called to treat frostbite at the Garrett Ranch. She borrowed Dr. Holcomb's sleigh and sturdy mare, bundling herself in wool and fur against the bitter wind. The return journey took longer than expected. Fresh snow had obscured familiar landmarks, and the mare picked her way carefully through drifts that reached her belly. By the time Clara spotted the strange cabin through the trees, her fingers were numb despite thick gloves, and the early winter dusk was falling. She hadn't meant to find it, had turned left instead of right at a fork, following what she thought was the trail but was merely a deer path. The cabin sat in a small clearing, smoke rising from its chimney, looking exactly as she remembered from that October night. The smart choice would be to turn around, retrace her path to the main road, but the mare was tired, the temperature dropping fast, and that smoke promised warmth. Besides, the cabin might be occupied by anyone: trappers, hunters, travelers seeking shelter. She knew better, though. Knew it even before she saw the familiar bay horse in the lean-to stable. Clara tied her mare beside his mount and approached the door, medical bag in hand like a shield. She knocked, though it felt foolish given their history. "It's open," came the voice from inside. She entered to find Cole sitting at the rough table, cleaning his rifle by lamplight. He didn't look surprised to see her, merely resigned, as if he'd been expecting this intrusion into his solitude. "Lost again, Miss Hensley?" The storm covered the usual markers. She stood just inside the door, uncertain. "I was returning from the Garrett Ranch." "That's 6 miles in the wrong direction." "Yes, well, your cabin seems to have a way of attracting lost travelers." His mouth quirked slightly, not quite a smile. "Close the door. You're letting the heat out." She did, then stood awkwardly as he continued working on his rifle. The cabin looked exactly the same as before, perhaps a bit more lived in. A few more supplies on the shelves, an extra blanket on the bed, a book surprising lying open on the table. "Poetry?" she asked, glimpsing the pages. He closed it quickly. Man gets tired of his own thoughts sometimes. "Wordsworth? I wouldn't have guessed." "You wouldn't have guessed a lot of things about me, Miss Hensley." "Clara," she corrected. "You've used my given name before." "That was a mistake." She moved closer to the fire, pulling off her gloves. "Was it, or was letting me leave that night the mistake?" He set down the rifle with careful precision. "What do you want?" "To warm up before I freeze to death finding my way back to town. Is that acceptable? Or would you prefer I risk dying to preserve your precious solitude?" "Don't be dramatic. Don't be obtuse." They glared at each other across the small space. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a real laugh that transformed his face, making him younger, lighter. "Sit," he said. "I'll heat some coffee." She sat, watching him move around the cabin with economical grace. He'd fully healed from the knife wound, she noted with professional satisfaction. But there was a new weariness in his movements, the kind that came from too many cold nights and solitary miles. "You've been living here," she observed. "Not just passing through." Winter changes the game. Even drifters need a base when the snow gets deep. So you're staying? He handed her a cup of coffee, strong and black. For now, until the passes clear in spring. That's months away. I can count. Clara. There it was, again her name, spoken like he couldn't help himself. She sipped the coffee, letting its heat chase away the last of the cold. The men with badges, she said. Did they find you? They found someone. Wasn't me. But they're still looking. He sat across from her, his own cup cradled in scarred hands. There's always someone looking for something. Man learns to stay ahead of the search. That's no way to live. It's the only way I know. They sat in silence as darkness pressed against the windows. She should leave. The mare was rested. She could follow the cabin's trail back to the main road, but something held her there, some recognition of matching loneliness. I could stay, she heard herself say. Just tonight. The trail's treacherous in the dark, and the mare's tired. He studied her for a long moment. That's not wise. When have I ever been wise? A wise woman wouldn't have left Kansas, wouldn't have followed a drifter's directions to a frontier town, certainly wouldn't have tracked him to a creek bed to tend his wounds. Clara, I'm not asking for promises. Cole, I'm not some frontier bride looking for a husband. I'm just cold and tired and very glad to find a familiar face, even if it's one that keeps warning me away. He rose abruptly, pacing to the window. You don't understand. The life I've led, the things I've done. We've all done things. The war taught everyone that survival makes philosophers of us all. This is different. Is it you think you're the only one with ghosts? I held boys' hands while they died, lied to them about getting better, stole morphine from the dying to give to those who might live. I chose who got the last of the bandages, the final dose of laudanum. Don't talk to me about difficult choices. He turned from the window, something raw in his expression. Why did you really come here? The truth, not the story about wrong turns. She set down her cup, meeting his gaze steadily. Because I've spent 2 months building a perfectly respectable life in town, and I'm already suffocating. Because everyone there sees the nurse, the proper spinster doing good works, and no one sees me because you're the only person who's looked at me like I'm real since... She stopped, unwilling to voice the rest. Since Robert had proved false, since the war ended and left her purposeless, since she'd realized that independence could be another word for isolation. I see you, he said quietly. That's the problem. I see you too clearly. The fire crackled between them. Outside, wind rattled the shutters, promising another storm. The mare whinnied softly from the stable, settling in for the night as horses do when they sense they're not going anywhere. Then let me stay, she said. Just tonight. We can go back to being strangers tomorrow if that's what you need. He crossed to her in 2 strides, pulling her to her feet. For a moment they stood close enough to share breath, his hands on her shoulders, her palms flat against his chest. You think you know what you're asking, he said roughly. You think one night means nothing. But I've lived too long on nothing. One night of something real might break what's left of my resolve. Maybe it needs breaking. And when morning comes, when I still can't offer you anything but a cabin in the woods and a target on your back for associating with me, then we'll face morning when it arrives. I'm tired of living for tomorrow. Cole, aren't you? He studied her face as if memorizing it. Then, slowly, he released her shoulders and stepped back. Take the bed, he said, voice carefully controlled. I'll sleep by the fire like before. Cole. Please. The word came rough, almost broken. I'm trying to do right by you. She wanted to argue, to tell him that right and wrong had gotten complicated somewhere between Kansas and Wyoming. But the look in his eyes stopped her, a mixture of want and fear that she recognized from her own mirror. All right, she said softly. But we talk. No more silence. If I'm staying, I want to know who you are beyond the warnings and the running. He nodded slowly, Fair enough. They talked through the evening and into the night. He told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to shoot before he could properly read, about hiring out his gun after the war because it was the only skill he had that people would pay for, about the job that went wrong, the man who died, who maybe didn't deserve to, the price on his head that wasn't large enough to interest serious bounty hunters but sufficient to keep him moving. She told him about Kansas, about thinking love meant one thing and discovering it meant another, about the war years, the faces that haunted her, the moment she realized she could never go back to being the innocent girl who'd volunteered to roll bandages. "We're a pair," he said finally, banking the fire. "Two people who can't go back and don't know how to go forward." "Maybe that's enough," she said from the bed, watching his silhouette against the dying flames. "Maybe just stopping for a while is its own kind of progress." He spread his bedroll by the hearth, but she could tell he wasn't sleeping. Neither was she, despite the exhaustion that weighed her bones. The space between them hummed with possibility and restraint. "Clara," his voice came soft in the darkness. "Yes." "I'm glad you turned left instead of right." She smiled into the pillow that smelled of wood smoke and pine. "So am I." Morning would come with all its complications. The mare would need returning to Dr. Holcomb. The townspeople would wonder where she'd spent the night. The men with badges would keep looking, and Cole would eventually feel the pull of the horizon. But for now, in this stolen night, two damaged souls had found shelter in more than just a cabin. They'd found the beginning of something neither quite dared to name not love, not yet, but recognition. The understanding that sometimes the broken places in one person fit perfectly against the broken places in another. It wasn't much, but it was enough to build on. One careful night at a time. The blizzard that trapped them began just after dawn. Clara woke to howling wind and snow piling against the windows, while Cole stood at the door, studying the wall of white. "How long?" she asked, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. 3 days, maybe 4. He closed the door against the wind. "Hope Doctor Holcomb wasn't expecting that mare back today." The forced proximity should have been awkward. Instead, it felt like grace time stolen from a world that demanded constant movement. They fell into an easy rhythm, Cole tending the horses and maintaining the fire, Clara organizing the medical supplies she'd brought and mending clothes they both needed repaired. "You're handy with a needle," he observed, watching her reinforce a torn seam in his coat. "Learn to stitch wounds before fabric. The principle's the same: bring the edges together, make them hold." She glanced up. "Though fabric doesn't flinch." "I didn't flinch." "No, you didn't." She returned to her work. "You've been hurt before, often, by the look of these scars." He was quiet for a moment. "Part of the life I chose." "Or the life that chose you. Does it matter? Results are the same." She knotted the thread and bit it off. "There, good as new, though I can't promise it'll hold if you keep diving through thorny brush." "I'll try to avoid it." He took the coat, fingers brushing hers. "Thank you." Such simple words, but they carried weight. How long since anyone had done small kindnesses for him? How long since he'd allowed it? The second day brought a different challenge. Cole developed a fever, nothing serious, but enough to worry Clara's trained eye. He tried to hide it, of course, but she caught the slight tremor in his hands, the careful way he moved. "Sit," she ordered, pressing a hand to his forehead. "You're burning up." "I'm fine." "You're not? When did this start?" "Yesterday. It's nothing comes and goes. Old bullet wound acts up in the cold." She made him show her a puckered scar below his right shoulder blade. Angry red and hot to touch. Not infected, thankfully, but inflamed enough to cause systemic reaction. "This needs a poultice," she said, already reaching for her bag. "And you need rest." "Clara." "No arguments. You've spent 3 years pushing through pain and illness alone. Well, you're not alone now, and I won't watch you suffer for the sake of stubborn pride." He submitted to her ministrations with surprising docility, sitting still as she applied the warm poultice of herbs and clean cloth. When she finished, he caught her hand. "Why do you care what happens to me?" She looked at their joined hands, his rough with calluses, hers bearing the permanent stains of iodine and carbolic. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe because you're the first person in a long time who hasn't tried to fix me or save me or tell me what I should want. You just let me be." "You don't need fixing. Neither do you." They stayed like that, hands linked, until the poultice cooled and needed changing. That night, when chills racked him despite the fever, Clara ignored his protests and pulled his bedroll next to the bed. "Body heat helps," she said pragmatically, though her heart raced. "The war taught us that much." He was too miserable to argue. She lay beside him, not quite touching, listening to his labored breathing gradually ease. Sometime near dawn, his hand found hers in the darkness and held on. The fever broke by morning, leaving him weak but clear-eyed. Clara made broth from the dried meat and vegetables in his stores, bullying him into eating despite his claims of no appetite. "You're bossy," he muttered, but drank the broth. "I'm a nurse. It's our primary qualification." "That why you never married, too busy ordering men around?" She stiffened slightly. "I was engaged. Once." He waited, not pushing, and somehow that made it easier to continue. "Robert Thornton, son of a banker, veteran of the war, though he never saw combat quartermaster corps?" She stared into her own cup. "Everyone said we were perfect for each other. Respectable families, similar ages, shared experiences of the war. I believed them. What changed? I discovered he had other interests. An establishment on the wrong side of town that catered to particular tastes. The madam was very understanding when I came to verify the rumors, even offered me a job. Said I had the backbone for it." She smiled bitterly. I thanked her and went home to break the engagement. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It taught me something valuable, that respectable isn't the same as good, and that what looks perfect rarely is. So you came west." "So I came west." She met his eyes. "Your turn. Who was she?" "What makes you think there was a she?" "Because men who avoid women the way you do are either priests or nursing broken hearts, and you're no priest." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Maria, Mexican girl from a little town near the border. I was young, maybe 22, working cattle for her father. Thought I'd marry her. Settle down, raise horses." "What happened?" "Raiders hit the ranch while I was moving cattle to market. Comancheros, white men dressed as Indians, stealing and killing for profit." His voice went flat. "By the time I got back, nothing left but ashes and graves. Her father lived long enough to tell me which way they went." Clara's heart constricted. "Did you find them?" "Every last one." He stared at the fire. "That's how I learned I was good at killing. Too good. Word spread man who tracked down 8 Comancheros and left them for the buzzards. Job offers started coming. Seemed like a way to, I don't know, balance the scales. But scales don't balance that way. No, they don't. They just keep tipping back and forth, blood for blood, until you can't remember what you were trying to make right." She rose and refilled his cup, then sat beside him on the floor, shoulders touching. "We're a fine pair of wounded souls, aren't we?" "That we are." The third day of the storm brought a different kind of tension. The fever gone. Cole was restless, pacing the small cabin like a caged wolf. Clara watched him check the windows, test the door, hand never far from his gun. "No one's coming in this weather," she said. Habits die hard. "Do you ever stop, ever just exist without waiting for the next threat?" He paused by the window. "Not for a long time, maybe not ever. It's why I keep moving harder to hit a target that won't stay still." "That's surviving, not living." "Same thing in my world." "It doesn't have to be." He turned to her, something desperate in his eyes. What are you suggesting, that I settle down? Become a shopkeeper? Take up farming? I've got blood on my hands. Clara, that doesn't wash off. I've got blood on mine too. Every nurse does, the ones we couldn't save. The choices we made. You think your ghosts are special because you put them there on purpose? It's different. It's not. She stood, crossing to him. You think you're the only one who's taken life? I gave overdoses to men screaming with their guts hanging out, knowing it would kill them faster. I decided who got the last of the medicine. Her voice broke. He pulled her against him, and she let herself lean into his strength, breathing in leather and wood smoke and safety. I'm sorry, he murmured into her hair. I'm sorry for all of it. I don't want apologies. She pulled back to look at him. I want to stop running too. Stop pretending the past defines everything. Stop being afraid of wanting more than just survival. Clara, the storm's ending. Tomorrow, maybe the day after, we'll be able to leave. You'll go back to drifting. I'll go back to town, and we'll pretend this never happened. Or we admit that something is happening here. Something neither of us expected or looked for, but something real nonetheless. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. You know what you're risking. Association with me makes you a target. The respectable life you're building. I never wanted respectable. I wanted real. I wanted to feel alive again instead of just going through the motions. She covered his hands with hers. These 3 days I've felt more myself than I have in years. Haven't you? Instead of answering, he kissed her. Not desperate or demanding, but careful, almost reverent, like a man afraid of breaking something precious. She kissed him back with all the longing of her lonely months, all the recognition of a kindred spirit. When they parted, both breathing unsteadily, he rested his forehead against hers. I can't promise anything, he said. Can't promise I'll stay. Can't promise they won't find me. Can't promise. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for honesty. For however long we have, be honest with me. No pretending, no walls, just us. I can try. That's all anyone can do. That night, as the storm finally began to blow itself out, they shared the narrow bed. Not as lovers, not yet, but as two people learning to trust in warmth after too long in the cold. His arms around her felt like both safety and danger, like coming home and stepping off a cliff. I should warn you away, he murmured against her hair. Should make you go and never come back. You tried that. I'm notably bad at following directions. I noticed. She felt him smile. Stubborn woman. Difficult man. We're going to be a disaster. Probably. She turned in his arms to face him. But maybe we'll be a beautiful one. He kissed her again, and she thought that some things were worth the risk of burning. Some people were worth the certainty of eventual pain, because the alternative, the safe, respectable, lonely life waiting in town was a different kind of death. A slow one, measured in proper behavior and empty evenings, and the gradual numbing of everything that made her feel human. Here, in this cabin with this haunted man, she felt blazingly alive. The storm would end. Reality would intrude. But for now, for these last stolen hours, two wounded souls had found in each other not healing that would take longer than any blizzard, but hope. And hope, Clara thought as she drifted toward sleep in Cole's arms, was its own kind of beginning. Clara returned to Timber Hollow alone, leading Dr. Holcomb's mare through streets still clogged with snow. The old doctor accepted her explanation of sheltering from the storm without question, though Mrs. Hutchins gave her a long, knowing look at dinner. That Maddox cabin's a fair piece from the Garrett Ranch, the landlady observed quietly as she passed the potatoes. I took a wrong turn in the storm, Clara replied evenly. Easy to do in weather like that? Mrs. Hutchins' eyes held no judgment, only concern. Just remember, some roads are harder to turn back from than others. Clara thought of Cole's hands mending harness that morning, the careful distance he'd maintained as he helped her saddle the mare. They'd agreed she would return to town first, alone. He'd follow in a day or two, after making sure no one had used the storm as cover to track him to the cabin. 2 weeks passed without word. Clara threw herself into her work, treating an outbreak of croup among the miners' children, helping deliver twins at the Perkins farm. But at night, lying in her narrow bed at the boarding house, she remembered warmth and whispered conversations and the feeling of being truly seen. Then came the evening when Sarah burst into the parlor, eyes bright with gossip. "There's been a shooting at Murphy's camp. 2 men dead. They say, sheriff's riding out now." Clara's hand stilled on her mending. "Who?" "Don't know yet, but Tom Brennan says one of them was asking about Cole Maddox yesterday." The needle pricked Clara's finger, drawing blood. She pressed it to her lips, tasting copper and fear. She was still awake when the sheriff returned near midnight. Through her window, she watched him trudge to his office, shoulders heavy with news, unable to wait for morning gossip. She dressed and slipped out. The sheriff looked up as she entered, not surprised. "Figured you'd come. Miss Hensley, heard you've been friendly with Maddox. Is he—" "He's alive, winged, but walking. Other 2 weren't so lucky." The sheriff, a decent man named Walsh, poured himself coffee with hands that shook slightly. "Bounty hunters out of Colorado. Had papers on Maddox, though they were old. Seems they figured to collect regardless of legal niceties." "Where is he?" "That's the thing." Walsh studied her over his cup. "Man saves my deputy's life. Drops 2 killers who are about to bushwhack Murphy's whole camp. And I'm supposed to arrest him for a 5-year-old warrant from Texas Times like this. The law and justice part ways." Clara waited, hope and fear warring in her chest. "I told him to get patched up and get gone," Walsh continued. "Gave him till dawn. But Miss Hensley, he was hurt worse than he let on. Lost blood. If someone with medical knowledge doesn't tend him soon." "Where?" "Can't say officially. But if I were a wounded man needing shelter, and I knew a skilled nurse who might be sympathetic, I'd probably hole up somewhere she'd already proven she could find." Clara was out the door before he finished speaking. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. She found Cole collapsed just inside the cabin door. Snow beneath him, stained dark with blood. His coat was torn along the left side, the fabric sodden. "Stubborn man," she muttered, dragging him toward the bed. "Too proud to ask for help even when you're bleeding to death." His eyes fluttered open. "Clara, you shouldn't—" "Shut up!" She was already cutting away his coat, assessing the damage. Bullet furrow along his ribs, deep but not fatal if properly treated. "Of course you rode all this way instead of coming to town. Of course you did." "Didn't want to bring trouble to you." Too late for that. She worked quickly, a lifetime of battlefield training taking over. Clean the wound, check for debris, pack it with carbolic-soaked gauze. What happened? They jumped Murphy's camp at dusk. Would have killed everyone there for harboring me. His jaw tightened as she worked. Couldn't let that happen. "So you played hero. Played killer? That's what I'm good at. Remember." She looked up from her work. "You saved innocent lives. That matters." "Does it 2 more dead men on my conscience? 2 more ghosts? Would you rather have the ghosts of Murphy and his men of people who helped you?" He had no answer for that. She finished bandaging the wound, then made him drink water laced with laudanum for the pain. As the drug took effect, she cleaned the blood from his skin, noting old scars and new bruises, mapping the violence written on his body. "Sheriff Walsh gave you till dawn." She said, "I know. You can't ride like this. You'll tear open the wound before you make 10 miles. Don't have much choice. You could stay." He caught her hand. "Clara, no, this proves it being near me puts you at risk. If those bounty hunters had known about you." "But they didn't, and they're dead, while you're alive." She gripped his hand tightly. I'm not naive. Cole, I know the risks, but I also know that sending you away wounded and alone feels like a different kind of death. You think I'm running from something? He said, echo of their first real conversation. Maybe I am, from the law, from the past, from the man I became, but mostly I'm running from hope, from the possibility that I could have something good and not destroy it. Then stop running, just for a while. The sheriff won't look for you here. He all but told me so. Stay until you're healed. That's all I'm asking. The laudanum was pulling him under, but he fought it. And then you decide? Keep running if you must, but make it a choice, not a habit. He slept fitfully, fever coming and going as his body fought infection. Clara stayed beside him, bathing his face with cool cloths, forcing broth between his lips when he woke. The second night, when delirium took hold, he called for Maria, apologizing in broken Spanish for not being there, for failing her. Shh, Clara soothed, holding his thrashing hands. She knows. She forgives you. Can't forgive myself. Then let someone else carry that weight for a while. You don't have to do this alone anymore. When his fever finally broke on the third day, he woke clear-eyed to find her asleep in the chair beside the bed, hand still clasping his. Morning light caught the auburn in her hair, highlighted the exhaustion shadowing her eyes. You stayed, he said wonderingly. She stirred, blinking awake. Of course I stayed. Someone had to keep you from doing something stupid like trying to ride with a hole in your side. I meant you stayed with me, through the worst of it. I'm a nurse. It's what we do. No. He turned his hand to interlace their fingers. It's what you do, for me, even knowing what I am. I know exactly what you are. She leaned forward, pressing her free hand to his forehead, checking for fever. You're a man who's made choices, some good, some bad. Who's carried the weight of those choices alone for too long? Who saves people even when it costs him everything? That's a generous interpretation. It's an honest one. She sat back but didn't release his hand. The question is, what do you want to be now? He was quiet for a long moment, studying their joined hands. When I was delirious, did I say things? You called for Maria, apologized to her. What did you tell me? That she forgives you. You don't know that. No, but I know this loving someone means wanting their happiness, even after death. She wouldn't want you to spend your life punishing yourself. No one who truly loved you would want that. He pulled her down beside him on the bed, careful of his bandages. She curled against his good side, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. I want to try, he said quietly, to stop running, to be, whatever this is, with you. But Clara, I don't know how. I've been alone so long, I might have forgotten how to be with someone. Then we'll remember together, or learn new ways. She pressed a kiss to his shoulder. I'm not asking you to become someone else. I'm asking you to be yourself, here, with me. Even if myself is a wanted man with blood on his hands. Even then, though Sheriff Walsh seemed remarkably uninterested in old warrants from Texas, said something about justice and law parting ways. Cole huffed a soft laugh. Walsh is a good man, better than the law he serves sometimes. Most people are, that's what you've forgotten, hiding in these woods, that most people are decent, given the chance. You really believe that after the war, after everything, I have to, otherwise, what's the point of any of it? They lay quietly as the sun climbed higher, warming the cabin. Finally, Cole spoke again. I'll need to find work. Can't live on air and good intentions. Murphy would hire you, or the logging camps always need men. Nothing that would put you in the public eye. And you'd go back to town, keep building your practice. For now, though. She hesitated, then forged ahead. Mrs. Chen mentioned there's a family homesteading about 5 miles north, Too far from town for regular doctor visits. They might welcome someone with medical skills living closer. You'd leave town, give up the respectable life you've built. I told you before I never wanted respectable. I wanted real. She propped herself up to look at him. This feels real, more real than anything has in years. He touched her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. You're sure once word spreads that you've taken up with me? Let them talk. I've been gossiped about before and survived. She turned her head to kiss his palm. Besides, I have a feeling Mrs. Hutchins has been quietly preparing the ground. She's got more influence than she lets on, and she approves of you, despite herself. She told you that? She told me that some people are worth the trouble they bring. That a man who faces danger to protect others might be exactly what a woman who's seen too much needs. And what does that woman need? Clara smiled, leaning down to kiss him softly. Someone who sees her truly. Someone who doesn't try to fix her or save her, just stands beside her. Someone who understands that broken doesn't mean worthless. I can try to be that. You already are. As his wound healed over the following weeks, they talked about possibilities. A small place between town and wilderness where Clara could practice medicine for the scattered homesteaders, where Cole could work honestly hunting, trapping, guiding without constantly looking over his shoulder, where two damaged souls could build something new from the pieces of their former lives. It wouldn't be easy. There would still be nights when his ghosts came calling, days when her memories of the war overwhelmed her. The past couldn't be erased, only integrated into something larger. Something shared. But as Clara watched Cole slowly trust in the possibility of staying, of building rather than running, she thought that redemption wasn't a destination. It was a direction, and they were finally, tentatively, walking that path together. Spring came late that year, and with it, Clara's first real test of belonging in Timber Hollow. She'd returned to town after nursing Cole back to health, resuming her rounds and clinic hours as if nothing had changed. But things had changed, and everyone knew it. The whispers started at church, spreading through the general store and into the boarding house parlor. Clara Hensley, that respectable nurse, had been seen coming and going from the Maddox cabin, spending nights unchaperoned with a known gunman. What kind of woman did such things? The kind who saves lives. Mrs. Hutchins said sharply when the gossip reached her breakfast table. Or have you all forgotten how Miss Hensley tended your children through the croup? How she stayed up 3 nights straight with the widow Morrison when the pneumonia nearly took her. But defending words could only do so much. Clara felt the shift in how people looked at her, some with pity, others with scandalous curiosity, a few with outright disapproval. Mothers who'd once begged for her help now hesitated before bringing their children to her clinic. The church auxiliary president suggested, ever so delicately, that perhaps Clara might prefer to worship at home for a while. Let me come to town, Cole said when she told him. They sat by his fire, sharing the simple dinner he'd prepared. Make it clear what courting that would require you appearing in public, which defeats the purpose of lying low. Clara stared into her coffee cup. Besides, what could you say that your intentions are honorable? We both know that's not quite true. My intentions toward you are nothing but honorable. Your intentions toward me involve considerably more than holding hands at church socials, and we both know it. He had the grace to look slightly abashed. Fair point, but Clara, you're losing everything you built because of me. I'm losing their approval. There's a difference. She set down her cup firmly. The question is whether I care more about what they think or about what we have. And I spent years caring what people thought. It brought me a respectable engagement to a man who visited establishments twice a week. It brought me a life so proper and empty I couldn't breathe. She moved to sit beside him. This us, it's complicated and improper and probably foolish. But it's also the first real thing I've felt in years. He pulled her close, and she breathed in the familiar scent of wood smoke and leather. You deserve better than complicated. I deserve honest. And you're the most honest person I know, even when you're trying to lie." 2 days later, Clara made a decision. She walked into Mrs. Chen's store with her head high and asked to place a notice in the window. "C. Hensley, nurse, now taking patients at the old Baxter homestead. House calls available." Mrs. Chen read the notice twice. "The Baxter place, that's 4 miles from town." "Yes, I've arranged to rent it. There are several families out that way who need medical care but can't always make the journey to town. It's also only a mile from the Maddox cabin." Mrs. Chen observed neutrally. "Is it I hadn't measured?" Clara met her gaze steadily. "Will you post the notice?" Mrs. Chen smiled slightly. "Of course, a woman must make her own way. Must she not, as I did when I came here from San Francisco, despite those who said a Chinese woman had no business running a store?" Clara felt a rush of gratitude. "Thank you." "Besides," Mrs. Chen added, hanging the notice prominently, "Mr. Maddox paid cash for supplies last week. First time in 3 years he's bought flour and sugar in quantities suggesting more than one person eating. A man planning for company is a man planning to stay. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk." The Baxter homestead had stood empty for 2 years, ever since the family moved to California seeking gold. It was small, just 2 rooms and a lean-to kitchen, but solid, with good bones and a well that ran clear even in drought. Clara spent a week cleaning and repairing, helped by Cole and, surprisingly, by Sarah from the boarding house. "You don't have to do this," Clara said as Sarah attacked cobwebs with fierce determination. "People will talk about you too." "Let them," Sarah replied. "You're the only person in this town who treated me like I was worth something when I arrived. Hotel maid isn't respectable either, but you never looked down on me." On her 3rd day at the homestead, Clara heard horses approaching. She stepped onto the porch to find a small delegation: Mrs. Hutchins, Mrs. Chen, and 3 other women from town, including Mrs. Garrett from the ranch. "Heard you were setting up house." "Mrs. Hutchins said briskly. "Thought you might need some things." They'd brought curtains and preserves, a quilt pieced by the church auxiliary, dried herbs for medicinal use. More than the gifts, they brought acceptance not of her choices, perhaps, but of her right to make them. "Don't mistake us, Mrs. Garrett said quietly as they shared tea. "We don't all approve, but you saved my grandson when the fever took him last fall. That matters more than propriety." After they left, Clara sat on her new porch and cried tears of relief and recognition. She wasn't fully accepted, might never be again, but she wasn't cast out either. Small frontier towns, it seemed, had their own arithmetic of belonging, where usefulness could outweigh scandal if the balance was right. Cole found her there at sunset, bringing fresh venison and news from the logging camps. "You've been crying," he observed, immediately alert. "Good tears," she assured him. "Complicated tears, but good." He sat beside her on the step, and she told him about the women's visit. His expression softened as he listened. "They came for you," he said, "not because of what you can do for them, but for you. Some of them, maybe, others came because they're pragmatic enough to know they'll need a nurse again someday. Still, it's something." He took her hand. "More than I expected, honestly." "What about you? Any trouble at the camps?" "Murphy vouched for me. Said any man who'd risk his life for strangers was welcome at his fire." Cole shook his head slightly, as if still surprised by the grace. Even got offered steady work, $1 a day, and found guiding supply runs through the passes. "Will you take it?" Thinking about it, it'd mean being gone sometimes, week or 2 at a stretch during good weather. Clara squeezed his hand. "I'll be here. That's what I'm counting on." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains gold and crimson. This was becoming their patterned separate days, shared evenings, careful navigation of a relationship that defied easy classification. "I've been thinking," Clara said eventually. About what we are to each other. Cole tensed slightly. Oh. We're not courting in any traditional sense. We've already moved past that. But we're not anything else recognized by law or society either. Are you asking for something recognized? She turned to study his profile. Are you offering? I've got nothing to offer a wife. Clara, no name worth giving, no prospects beyond day labor, no promise I won't have to run again if someone comes looking too hard. I didn't ask what you could offer a wife. I asked if you were offering. He turned to face her fully, dark eyes serious. If I was free to, would you want that marriage to a man with my past? I want partnership with the man you are now. The rest is just paperwork. Paperwork that would make you Mrs. Maddox on every legal document? That would tie you to my reputation permanently. And tie you to mine, the scandalous nurse who lives in sin outside town. She smiled slightly. We're quite a pair. That's not an answer. Clara took a breath. Yes, if you asked, if we could, I would marry you. Not for respectability or security, but because I want to wake up every morning knowing you're mine and I'm yours in every way that matters. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, like a drowning man finding air. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I can't offer marriage, he said roughly. Not legally, not with my name on wanted posters. But I can offer everything else. Partnership, fidelity, whatever home we can build together. My word that you're the only woman I want, for whatever time we have. That's enough, Clara whispered. More than enough. They went inside as darkness fell, and that night their relationship shifted into something deeper. Not marriage by law, but marriage by choice. Two people deciding to bind their lives together despite the lack of official sanction. Despite the complications it would bring. Later, as Clara lay in Cole's arms in the bed they would now share, she thought about respectability and its costs. She'd had at once the proper engagement, society's approval, a clear path to conventional happiness. It had been a cage built of others' expectations. This a small homestead between town and wilderness, a partnership with a man outside the law. Work that served scattered families instead of established society. This was freedom. Complicated, uncertain freedom. But hers by choice. No regrets? Cole asked softly in the darkness. None, Clara said, and meant it. You! Only that I can't give you more. You've given me yourself. That's everything. He tightened his arms around her, and she felt the truth of it settle into her bones. They might never have a church wedding or social acceptance. His past might always shadow their future. But they had this honest love built on mutual recognition of damage and beauty intertwined. In the morning, she would face whatever gossip her choice brought. She would treat patients who whispered about her afterward. Maintain her dignity in the face of those who judged. It would not be easy. But tonight, in the arms of a man who saw her truly and loved her still, Clara felt more married than any ceremony could have made her. Some bonds, she was learning, were stronger for being forged in defiance of convention. And if that made her a woman living in sin, so be it. She'd rather live in honest sin than respectable falsehood. The homestead settled around them, creaking gently in the night wind. Soon it would hold the smell of her herbs drying, his leather being worked, their shared meals and quiet conversations. It would become home in ways her proper boarding house room never could have been. Tomorrow would bring its challenges. But tonight, Clara Hensley, who might never be Clara Maddox in the eyes of the law, but was already his in every way that mattered, slept peacefully in the arms of her chosen partner, and counted herself blessed. Summer brought unexpected prosperity to Clara's medical practice. The scattered homesteaders, less concerned with town proprieties than with practical needs, welcomed a skilled nurse who would travel to them. She delivered babies in dugout homes, treated injuries from farming accidents, and became known for her willingness to accept payment in eggs, preserved goods, or labor. Cole took Murphy's offer of steady work. guiding supply trains through mountain passes. The separations were hard a week here. 10 days there, but they made the reunion sweeter. Clara would watch from the porch as he rode up the trail, dusty and tired but whole, and feel her heart lift every time. One evening in late July, as they shared supper in their small kitchen, Clara noticed Cole's unusual quietness. He'd returned from a supply run that morning but seemed distant, troubled. "What is it?" she asked finally. "Did something happen on the trail?" He set down his fork, meeting her eyes. "There was a man at the mining camp, from Texas, recognized me, though he didn't say anything in front of others." Clara's stomach tightened. "Will he—" "No. Turns out we rode together once, years back. He's got his own reasons for keeping quiet about the past." Cole reached across the table to take her hand. "But it reminded me how fragile this is, what we've built." "Everything worthwhile is fragile," Clara said. "That's what makes it precious." "I don't want to lose this, lose you." "Then don't. Stop waiting for it to end and just live it." That night, as they lay together in the narrow bed, Clara felt Cole's restlessness like a physical presence. She knew this mood, the urge to run before danger arrived, to leave before being left. She'd felt it herself after Robert's betrayal, that desperate need to escape before more hurt could find her. "Talk to me," she said into the darkness. "About what?" "About what you're not saying. About why one man recognizing you has you ready to saddle your horse and disappear." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because I've been happy. These past months with you I've been happy. And in my experience, happiness is just the universe's way of setting you up for a harder fall." Clara rolled to face him, though she could barely see his features in the darkness. "So you'd rather run from happiness than risk losing it?" "I'd rather spare you the consequences of my past catching up." "Our past. We're partners. Remember, your consequences are mine now." "That's what terrifies me." She found his face with her hands, tracing the worry lines around his eyes. "Cole Maddox, you listen to me. You don't get to make unilateral decisions about what I can or can't handle. You don't get to leave me for my own good or any such nonsense. If you leave, it'll be because you choose to go, not because you've convinced yourself it's noble. You'd want me to stay even if it brought danger to your door. I'd want you to stay and face that danger with me. That's what partners do." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "How'd a gunfighter end up with a woman this brave?" "Lucky, I guess," she murmured against his chest. "Now stop borrowing trouble and go to sleep. Morning will bring what it brings." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. What morning brought, 3 days later, was unexpected visitors. Clara was tending her herb garden when she heard horses approaching multiple riders, moving with purpose. Her hand went instinctively to the pistol she'd taken to wearing when Cole was away. But the lead rider was Sheriff Walsh, and his expression was more weary than threatening. With him rode 2 men Clara didn't recognize, one older with marshal's badges, one younger who had the look of a clerk or lawyer. "Miss Hensley," Walsh said, touching his hat. "Is Maddox about—" "He's at Murphy's camp," she said steadily. "Due back tomorrow." "Maybe that's for the best," the older stranger said. "Gives us time to talk reasonable like. I'm Federal Marshal Harrison, out of Denver. This here's Mr. Garrett, Territorial Legal Representative." Clara kept her expression neutral. "Would you gentlemen care for coffee?" They gathered around her kitchen table, an oddly domestic scene given the circumstances. Marshal Harrison was a weathered man in his 50s, with keen eyes that missed nothing. The lawyer, Garrett, looked barely older than Clara herself, nervous and sweating despite the morning coolness. "I'll be straight with you. Miss Hensley," Harrison began. "I know Maddox is here. Known it for months. Man leaves a trail if you know how to read it, and I've been reading trails for 20 years. Clara said nothing, waiting. "Thing is," Harrison continued, "I've also been reading his actions. Murphy's camp, the Watson Ranch last spring when those rustlers hit, half a dozen other times when someone with a fast gun and good aim helped folks who needed it. If you're looking for information about Mr. Maddox— I'm not looking for information, Harrison interrupted gently. I'm looking to close a file that should have been closed years ago. That's why I brought Mr. Garrett here. The young lawyer cleared his throat, pulling out documents. The original warrant for Cole Maddox stems from the death of one Samuel Morrison in Amarillo, Texas, 5 years ago. However, recent depositions from witnesses have shed new light on the circumstances. What witnesses? Clara asked, though she kept her voice carefully neutral. 3 men came forward last month, Garrett explained. Seems Morrison was running a gang that specialized in raid-and-run attacks on small ranches. The witness testimony indicates Mr. Maddox tracked the gang after they destroyed the Delgado Ranch, killing all inhabitants. The confrontation with Morrison was, by all accounts, self-defense during the course of bringing criminals to justice. Clara's heart began to pound, but she maintained her composure. Why come forward now, after all this time? Marshal Harrison smiled grimly. Because one of those witnesses is dying. Wanted to clear his conscience. The other 2 figured it was safe to talk with him going first. Seems they were more afraid of Morrison's remaining associates than the law. Additionally, Garrett added, shuffling papers, there's the matter of Mr. Maddox's recent actions. The territorial governor is interested in men who protect citizens rather than prey on them. There's a new amnesty program for certain categories of wanted men who've demonstrated reform. What are you saying? Clara asked, though she thought she knew. I'm saying, Harrison said, that if Cole Maddox were to appear before Judge Patterson in Denver, with character witnesses and a record of recent good conduct, he might find the law more forgiving than he expects. Clara studied both men carefully. And if he doesn't trust this sudden forgiveness, if he suspects a trap, then he keeps running, and I keep chasing, until one of us gets too old or too slow. Harrison stood, settling his hat. But I'm hoping he's smarter than that. Man with something to lose, someone to lose, tends to see options he didn't before. After they left, Clara sat at her table, staring at the documents Garrett had accidentally left behind. Legal precedents, amnesty provisions, testimonies that painted Cole as a man seeking justice rather than violence. Hope and fear warred in her chest. This could be salvation or an elaborate trap. When Cole returned the next evening, she told him everything, watching his face cycle through suspicion, disbelief, and something that might have been hope quickly suppressed. It's too convenient, he said finally. After all this time, witnesses suddenly appear. Or maybe, Clara suggested gently, after all this time, people feel safe enough to tell the truth. You think I should trust this walk into a courtroom and hope for the best? I think you should consider what you're fighting for now. She moved to stand before him. Is it worth the risk? He pulled her close, holding her like she might vanish. You know it is. You're worth any risk. Then maybe it's time to stop running from the past and start fighting for the future. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The next weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Sheriff Walsh, surprisingly, offered to accompany Cole to Denver as a character witness. Murphy and several others signed affidavits about Cole's recent actions. Even Mrs. Hutchins provided a letter, stating that any man Clara Hensley chose was, by definition, a man of worth. The night before Cole left for Denver, they stood together on their porch, watching stars emerge in the clear Wyoming sky. If this goes wrong, he began, it won't. But if it does, then I'll be here when you get out, however long it takes. He turned to face her. You can't promise that. Watch me. She gripped his hands tightly. Cole Maddox, I hereby promise that no matter what happens in Denver, I'll be here. This is our home, our life. I'll tend it until you return. And if I don't return, then I'll come find you. I'm notably bad at following orders about not following you. Remember, he kissed her then, under the vast western sky. and she tasted promise and fear and love too deep for words. When the moon rose full and bright, casting silver over their small homestead, she led him inside. "No more talk of not returning," she said firmly. "Tonight, we have each other. Tomorrow can wait." They came together with unusual intensity, as if trying to store up enough touch and warmth to last through whatever separation might come. Later, as Cole slept beside her, Clara lay awake praying to a God she wasn't sure she still believed in, asking for this one grace that the man she loved might finally be free to love her without shadows. In the morning, she stood on the porch and watched him ride away with Sheriff Walsh, back straight, face set with determination. He looked back once, touching his hat, and she raised her hand in farewell. "You come back to me," she whispered to the wind. "You hear me, Cole Maddox, you come back." The homestead felt empty without him, but Clara threw herself into work. She had patience to tend, a life to maintain, a home to keep ready for his return, because he would return. She had to believe that. Some things, she had learned, were worth the risk of hoping for, and Cole Maddox difficult, dangerous, deeply honorable. Cole was worth every risk she could take. The moon would rise and set, days would pass into weeks if necessary, but she would be here, waiting, working, believing that sometimes the universe offered second chances to those brave enough to grasp them. And when he came home, not if she would be ready to start the next chapter of their unlikely love story, one written not in the stars, but in the choices two damaged people made to heal together, to build something beautiful from the broken pieces of their pasts. The West was hard country, unforgiving of mistakes and generous with consequences, but it was also a place where people could remake themselves, where the past mattered less than the present, where love could bloom in the most unexpected soil. Clara Hensley, who might yet become Clara Maddox in the eyes of the law, tended her herbs and waited for her man to come home, and in that waiting, found a peace she'd never known in all her proper, respectable years. Some things were worth any amount of scandal. Cole Maddox was all of them, and more. 2 weeks passed with no word from Denver. Clara threw herself into her work with fierce determination, treating a broken arm at the Sullivan farm, delivering Mrs. Peterson's 4th child, preparing tinctures and salves for the coming winter. But at night, alone in the bed she'd shared with Cole, worry gnawed at her bones. The 3rd week brought an unexpected visitor. Clara was checking on the widow Morrison when young Tom Brennan came racing up on his pony. Miss Clara, there's a man at your place, a stranger with a badge." Clara's heart lurched, but she kept her voice steady. "Thank you. Tom, tell your mother I'll check on her tomorrow." She rode back faster than was wise, medical bag bouncing against her hip, pistol heavy in her pocket. But the man waiting on her porch wasn't Marshall Harrison. This one was younger, cleaner, with the look of city law rather than frontier justice. "Miss Hensley, I'm Deputy Marshal Williams from Denver." He touched his hat politely. "I have correspondence for you from Judge Patterson's court." With trembling hands, Clara took the envelope he offered. The seal was official, imposing. She stared at it, afraid to open it. "Ma'am," Williams said gently, "the judge asked me to wait for a reply." Clara broke the seal and unfolded the papers. The legal language swam before her eyes until she forced herself to focus, to read each word carefully. In the matter of Cole Maddox, testimony presented. Character witnesses, in light of evidence suggesting self-defense and subsequent reformation. Charges reduced. Time served considered against community service performed. She reached the final paragraph and had to sit down hard on the porch step. "It is the judgment of this court that Cole Maddox be granted conditional amnesty, contingent upon continued good conduct and registration with territorial authorities. The defendant is free to return to Wyoming territory." "Ma'am?" Williams looked concerned. "Are you well?" "He's free," Clara's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Cole's free. Yes, ma'am. Judge was impressed by the witnesses. Never seen Sheriff Walsh speak so plain about a man's character. And that Murphy fellow near talked the judge's ear off about Mr. Maddox saving his whole camp. Williams smiled. Judge said any man who inspired such loyalty while living as a fugitive must have something worth salvaging. Where is he, Cole? Left Denver yesterday. Ma'am, should be riding in any time now, depending on how hard he pushes. Asked me to ride ahead. Make sure you got word. Williams stood. Is there a reply you'd like me to take back? Clara laughed, tears streaming down her face. Yes, tell the judge. Tell him thank you. Tell him he's given us a future. After Williams left, Clara tried to continue her daily tasks, but found herself constantly watching the trail. She changed dresses twice, fixed her hair 3 times, started cooking a celebratory meal only to abandon it half done. It was near sunset when she finally saw him, a lone rider coming up the trail, moving steady but not rushed. She knew that posture, that way of sitting a horse like he was part of it. Clara ran down the steps, dignity forgotten, and met him as he dismounted. You're free, she said, touching his face as if to make sure he was real. Really free. Conditionally free, Cole corrected, but he was smiling. Have to check in with the territorial office quarterly, stay out of trouble, contribute to the community. You've been doing that anyway. Now I can do it without looking over my shoulder. He cupped her face in his hands. Clara, I can use my real name. I can sign documents. I can... He stopped, swallowing hard. What you can what? Instead of answering, he dropped to one knee right there in the dusty yard. From his pocket, he pulled a simple silver ring. I bought this in Denver, he said, voice rough with emotion. From a jeweler who asked if it was for my wife. I had to tell him not yet, but I wanted it to be true so badly I could taste it. He looked up at her, all his walls down, vulnerable as she'd never seen him. Clara Hensley, will you marry me, really marry me? In a church, with papers and witnesses and everything proper. Proper, Clara laughed through her tears. Cole Maddox, nothing about us has ever been proper. Then let's do this one thing right. Let me give you my name legally. Let me stand up in front of God and everybody and claim you as mine. Yes, Clara said, pulling him to his feet. Yes, to all of it. To you, to marriage, to whatever comes next. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it caught the last light of sunset. Simple, honest, perfect like the life they'd built against all odds. When? Clara asked, admiring how the silver band looked on her work-worn hand. Soon as you want. Tomorrow. Next week. Today. If we could find a preacher. Clara smiled. Ideas already forming. 2 weeks. Give me 2 weeks to do this right. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The wedding took place on a crisp October morning, a year to the day after Clara had first stumbled upon Cole's cabin in the storm. The small church in Timber Hollow was fuller than either of them had expected. Mrs. Hutchins had taken charge of arrangements with military precision, while Mrs. Chen contributed silk flowers from San Francisco. Sarah stood as Clara's witness, tears streaming down her face. Sheriff Walsh served as Cole's best man, looking uncomfortable but proud in his Sunday suit. But what surprised them most were the others who came. Murphy and his men, cleaned up and respectful. The Peterson family, whose baby Clara had delivered. Old Dr. Holcomb, wheezing but determined to see his protégé properly wed. Even some who'd whispered about Clara's choices came to witness this unexpected redemption. Clara wore her mother's dress, altered to fit and updated by the church sewing circle. Cole stood at the altar in a new suit bought with his first legal wages, looking nervous as a schoolboy. Dearly beloved, Reverend Adams began, we gather to witness something precious, not just a union of 2 people, but a testament to the power of second chances. The ceremony was simple, traditional, everything they hadn't had before. When Reverend Adams asked if anyone objected, the silence was profound. This community that had gossiped and judged had also watched two people build something real from difficult circumstances. They'd earned this moment. "Do you, Coleman Josiah Maddox, take this woman?" Cole's voice was steady. "Sure, I do." "Do you, Clara Rose Hensley, take this man?" "I absolutely do," Clara said, earning a ripple of laughter from the congregation. When Reverend Adams pronounced them husband and wife, when Cole kissed her in front of everyone they knew, Clara felt something settle in her chest. Not just love, they'd had that for months, but belonging. Recognition. The sense that their place in this community was finally, officially, secured. The reception at the boarding house was modest but joyful. Mrs. Hutchins had outdone herself with food, and someone had brought a fiddle. Cole led Clara in an awkward but heartfelt dance, whispering in her ear. "No regrets about marrying a reformed gunfighter." "None about marrying you," Clara corrected, "though I might regret it if you step on my foot again." He laughed, spinning her carefully. Around them. Their neighbors, for that's what they were now. Truly neighbors celebrated the triumph of love over law, choice over circumstance. As afternoon faded to evening, Cole and Clara slipped away to their homestead, their home, legally now, where her medical practice and his legitimate work would build a future neither had dared imagine a year ago. "Mrs. Maddox," Cole said as they stood on their porch, watching stars emerge. "I like how that sounds." "So do I," Clara admitted. "Though I am keeping C. Hensley for my practice, my patients are used to it. Whatever you want, I'm just grateful you're willing to take my name at all." Clara turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd warned her not to follow, who'd tried so hard to protect her from his shadows. "Cole Maddox, I would take your name in any circumstances, but I'm so glad we get to do it this way. Free and clear and legal. The respectable Mrs. Maddox," he teased. "What will the gossips do now? Find something else to talk about? I expect maybe Sarah and that new ranch hand who's been making eyes at her." They went inside, to the bed that was now their marriage bed in law as well as practice. The ring on Clara's finger caught lamplight as she reached for her husband, officially, finally. Later, as they lay entwined, Cole traced the silver band on her finger. "I meant what I said in Denver. You saved me, Clara, not from the law, from myself, from becoming someone too hard to ever come back from." "We saved each other," Clara corrected. "That's what partners do." Outside, an owl called across the darkness, and the October wind rattled the windows. But inside their small homestead, two people who'd found each other against all odds celebrated the simple, profound joy of being able to write their names together on a marriage certificate. Cole and Clara Maddox, legal, legitimate, lasting. The frontier had given them both second chances, and they'd built something beautiful from the ashes of their former lives. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, patients to treat, work to do, a life to build together. But tonight, in the eyes of law and God and community, they were simply what they'd been in their hearts for months. Husband and wife, partners, home. The winter of 1876 came hard and early, bringing with it an unexpected test of the life Cole and Clara had built together. They'd been married 3 months when the letter arrived, delivered by a stranger who rode away before Cole could question him. Clara watched her husband's face change as he read the single page, watched him sink slowly into a chair at their kitchen table. "What is it?" she asked, though part of her already knew. The past never stayed buried forever. "My brother," Cole said, voice hollow. "My younger brother James, he's alive." Clara sat across from him, taking his hands. In all their conversations, through all his confessions about his past, he'd never mentioned a brother. "Tell me." "I thought he died with Maria and her family. He was working at the ranch too, just 16, green as grass. When I found the bodies..." Cole's voice broke. I counted the dead, thought I found everyone, but his body I never found James. And now he's in prison in Colorado, sentenced to hang for murder. Cole looked at the letter again. He's asking for me. Says I'm the only family he has left. Clara felt the weight of this settle between them. 3 months of peaceful marriage, of building their practice and reputation, of Cole checking in dutifully with the territorial authorities. 3 months of normal life, now threatened by a ghost from the past. The conditions of your amnesty. Say I can't leave the territory without permission, can't associate with known criminals, can't risk any appearance of returning to my old life. Cole crushed the letter in his fist. If I go to him, I lose everything. If I don't. If you don't, you lose your brother. They sat in silence as the winter wind howled outside. Clara rose and made coffee, giving them both time to think. When she returned, Cole had smoothed out the letter, reading it again. What do you know about his crime? Clara asked. Nothing, just that he's James Maddox, scheduled to hang in 3 weeks for the murder of a Theodore Garrison in Leadville. Leadville's a mining town. Rough place. Clara considered. What if we did this legally? Asked Sheriff Walsh to help petition for permission for you to travel. And if they say no, or worse, if they revoke my amnesty for even asking? Clara reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. Then we face that together. But Cole, if your brother is innocent, how can he be innocent? He's in prison, convicted, just like I would have been if... He stopped, meeting her eyes. If people hadn't finally told the truth about what happened. Understanding dawned in Clara's expression. You think there might be more to his story. I abandoned him. Clara, left him for dead when he was just a boy. What kind of life did he have after that? What choices? Cole stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Maybe if I'd looked harder, searched longer. You were 22 and half mad with grief. You did what you could. Did I, or did I use their deaths as an excuse to become what I was already heading toward, a killer? A gun for hire? Clara rose and went to him, wrapping her arms around him from behind. You're not that man anymore. No, then why is my first instinct to strap on my guns and ride for Colorado? Law be damned. Because he's your brother. Because family means something to you, even after all these years. Cole turned in her arms, pulling her close. I can't lose you, can't lose this life we've built, but I can't let him hang without at least seeing him once more. Then we do this right, Clara said firmly. We talk to Sheriff Walsh. We petition the court. We follow every legal channel. And if those fail, then we decide what comes next. The next morning, they rode to town together. Sheriff Walsh listened to their story with his usual careful attention, then leaned back in his chair. Leadville, he said thoughtfully. I know the sheriff there. Tom Brennan, no relation to our Tom. Good man, honest as they come in a mining town. He studied Cole. You willing to trust the system that gave you a second chance? Do I have a choice? Always have a choice. Question is whether you make the right one. Walsh pulled out paper and pen. I'll write to Judge Patterson. Explain the situation. Might be he'll grant temporary permission for travel. Especially if I go with you. You'd do that? Clara asked. Man's got a right to see his brother. Besides. Walsh smiled grimly. I'm curious about this murder. Mining towns breed their own kind of justice. Might be worth looking into. The wait for a response was agony. Cole threw himself into physical work, chopping enough wood for 3 winters, repairing every fence on their property. Anything to keep his hands busy and his mind off the calendar. Clara treated her patients and pretended her thoughts weren't constantly on the brother-in-law she'd never known existed. 8 days later, Sheriff Walsh arrived with papers. Judge says yes, with conditions. I accompany you. We travel openly, no sneaking around. You'll report to Sheriff Brennan immediately upon arrival. And Cole, any hint of trouble, any suggestion you're reverting to old ways. And it's over, the amnesty, the freedom, All of it. I understand, Cole said. Do you? Because this isn't just about you anymore. Walsh glanced at Clara. You've got a wife now. A place in this community. Things worth protecting. That's why I have to go, Cole said quietly. Because if I don't, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have saved him. That kind of regret poisons everything it touches. Clara packed medical supplies while the men prepared for the journey. At the last moment, she made a decision. I'm coming with you. Both men turned to stare at her. Clara, no, Cole began. A man facing the gallows might need medical attention, and you'll need someone to keep you grounded. Remind you who you are now versus who you were then. She met his eyes steadily. Besides, I'm your wife. Where you go, I go. The journey's dangerous. Less dangerous than letting you face this alone. I've seen what guilt and grief do to you. Cole Maddox, I won't let you disappear into that darkness again. Sheriff Walsh surprised them by supporting her. Might be good to have her along. People see a man traveling with his wife. They see stability, responsibility, not a gunfighter looking for trouble. So it was decided. 3 days later, they set out for Colorado, a sheriff, a reformed gunman, and a frontier nurse, riding toward a meeting with the past that would test every promise the future held. The journey took a week through increasingly rough terrain. They stayed in way stations when possible, camped when necessary. Cole grew quieter with each mile, withdrawing into himself despite Clara's efforts to engage him. On their last night before reaching Leadville, he finally spoke his fears. What if he doesn't remember me? What if he does, and hates me for leaving? What if he's become... He stared into their campfire. What if he's become what I was? Then you'll face that truth together. Clara said, but Cole, what if he's innocent? What if he needs exactly what you needed someone to believe in him, to fight for him? I'm not sure I know how to do that without a gun. Then it's good you brought a wife who fights with words and medicine and sheer stubbornness. Sheriff Walsh, pretending to sleep on the other side of the fire, smiled slightly. They reached Leadville at midday, the mining town sprawling rough and raw against the mountains. The prison sat at the edge of town, a squat stone building that spoke of harsh justice quickly delivered. Sheriff Brennan, a weathered man with kind eyes, greeted them in his office. Walsh wrote ahead about your situation. I've arranged for you to see the prisoner. He paused. I should warn you, your brother's in bad shape. The trial was contentious. Garrison was a mine owner, wealthy, connected. Your brother was just another drifter who got crossways with the wrong man. What happened? Cole asked. According to witnesses, Garrison was beating a woman in the saloon, one of the workers there. Your brother intervened. Garrison pulled a knife. They struggled. Garrison ended up dead. Brennan shrugged. Clear self-defense to my mind, but Garrison's family has influence. The jury saw it different. Clara felt Cole tense beside her. The parallels to his own past were too obvious to miss violence in defense of others. A death that could be justified, but wasn't. The weight of law versus justice. Can we see him now? Cole asked, voice carefully controlled. Brennan led them through stone corridors to a small cell at the back. The man inside was indeed Cole's brother, the resemblance clear despite the years and hardship. James Maddox looked up as they approached, and his face transformed with recognition and disbelief. Cole, the name came out cracked, uncertain. Cole, is that really you? It's me, Jamie. Cole gripped the bars, knuckles white. I'm here. The brothers stared at each other through iron bars. 12 years of separation and sorrow between them. Clara stood back, watching the man she loved face the ghost he'd carried for so long. I thought you were dead, James said. When you didn't come back, I thought the raiders got you too. I thought the same about you. Jamie, I swear I looked for you. I know. I hid in the root cellar when they came, too scared to come out until near dawn. By then, James's voice broke. By then, you were gone, and everyone else was dead. The story spilled out then years of drifting, of anger, of trying to find his brother while running from the memory of that burning ranch. How he'd ended up in Leadville, working the mines, trying to build something honest until that night in the saloon. She was just a kid, James said, younger than Maria was. Garrison was drunk, mean, hurting her for sport. I couldn't just watch. No, Cole said quietly. You couldn't, not you. Clara stepped forward then. James, I'm Clara, Cole's wife. We're going to help you. Sheriff Walsh is already talking to the local authorities. And I've brought money for a proper lawyer. James looked at her with wonder. Cole got married, Cole. I'll never settle down, Maddox. Things change, Cole said roughly. People change. Jamie, we're going to fight this. Legal channels. Proper representation. The way it should be done. 2 weeks till they hang me. Brother, not much time for proper anything. Then we'd better get started, Clara said firmly. Tell us everything. Every detail about that night, about witnesses, about Garrison. Leave nothing out. As James began his tale again, this time with the careful detail needed for legal defense. Clara watched her husband's face. The guilt was still there, might always be there. But alongside it was determination, hope, the strength that came from having something to fight for with tools other than violence. They had 2 weeks to save a life, to reunite brothers, to prove that second chances could cascade from one person to another. It wouldn't be easy. The law that had shown mercy to Cole might not extend the same to James. But they would try, with words instead of guns, with truth instead of violence, with the patient building of a case rather than the quick draw of a weapon. The past had found them, as it always did. But this time, Cole Maddox wouldn't face it alone. This time, he had Clara and Sheriff Walsh, and the knowledge that justice and law could sometimes, with effort and courage, be made to align. 2 weeks to save a brother, 2 weeks to heal a family, 2 weeks to prove that the man Cole had become was strong enough to save others without losing himself. The work began. The lawyer they hired, Marcus Whitman, was young but sharp, with the kind of righteous fire that came from believing justice should mean something. He listened to James's story, took notes, and immediately began finding holes in the prosecution's case. No one questioned why Garrison was beating the girl, Whitman asked. No one wondered why a mine owner was drunk and violent at 2 in the afternoon. His family owns half the town, Sheriff Brennan said quietly. People knew not to ask. Well, I'm not from this town, Whitman replied, and I have questions. While Whitman built the legal case, Clara and Cole worked different angles. Clara visited the saloon, using her medical credentials to gain trust. The woman James had defended, a girl named Lucy, barely 18, was reluctant to speak until Clara treated her still healing bruises. He saved me, Lucy whispered. Mr. Garrison. He'd been after me for weeks. That day, he wouldn't take no for an answer. Your brother-in-law, he just asked him to stop, polite-like at first. Would you testify to that? Lucy's face paled. The Garrisons would ruin me, or worse. What if you had protection, a new start somewhere else? Cole, meanwhile, walked the dangerous line of investigating without appearing to intimidate. With Sheriff Walsh beside him, he talked to miners who'd witnessed the fight, slowly uncovering a pattern of Garrison's violence that the trial had ignored. Man was a terror, one grizzled miner admitted, but he paid well and his family's got reach, easier to look away. Until someone couldn't, Cole said quietly. 5 days before the scheduled execution, they had their break. A bartender named Samuel, tired of the Garrison family's threats, agreed to testify about what really happened. More importantly, he revealed that Garrison had pulled the knife first, a fact conveniently omitted from the trial. I served him that day, Samuel told Whitman. He was already 3 sheets to the wind, angry about some mining dispute. Came in looking for trouble. Your client just happened to be the one who stood up. But testimony needed to reach the right ears. The local judge who'd overseen the trial was deep in the Garrison family's pocket. They needed to appeal to higher authority, the territorial governor himself. "I'll ride to Denver," Sheriff Walsh announced. "My word might carry weight." "I'm going with you," Cole said. "No." Clara's voice was firm. "You're staying here with your brother. He needs to see you, to know you're not leaving again." She met his eyes. "Sheriff Walsh and I will go. A lawman and a respectable woman make better ambassadors than a reformed gunman." Cole wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. His presence in Denver might hurt more than help. So he watched his wife and the sheriff ride away, carrying papers that might save his brother's life. The next days were agony. Cole spent every allowed moment with James, the brothers slowly bridging 12 years of separation. They talked about the old ranch, about Maria, about the paths their lives had taken. "I looked for you," James said. "For years. Heard rumors about a fast gun named Maddox, but I couldn't believe my brother had become—" "I did become that," Cole said quietly. "For a while, until Clara found me and reminded me I could be something else. She's something special." "She is, and she'll fight for you like you're her own blood. That's who she is." 3 days before the execution, a dust cloud on the horizon announced returning riders. Cole's heart lifted seeing Clara safe, then sank at her expression. "The governor agreed to review the case," she said, exhaustion clear in every line. "But he won't stop the execution without a formal hearing. And there's no time." "There is, if we make time," Whitman interrupted, fire in his eyes. "I've been studying territorial law. There's a provision for emergency stays in cases of new evidence. We need a judge willing to invoke it. No judge here will cross the Garrisons." Sheriff Brennan said, "Then we find one who will." Clara said, "There must be someone in this territory who values justice over politics." They found him in Judge Ellis Cooper, a circuit judge who happened to be passing through a town 30 miles away. Cooper had a reputation for fairness and a known dislike of wealthy families buying verdicts. Cole and Sheriff Walsh rode through the night to reach him. Dawn was breaking when they found Cooper at breakfast in a boarding house. "You're asking me to stay an execution based on witness testimony that wasn't presented at trial?" Cooper asked after hearing their plea. "We're asking you to ensure justice is done." Cole said, "My brother defended an innocent woman. The man who died was the aggressor. These are facts the jury never heard." Cooper studied Cole for a long moment. "You're the gunman who got amnesty last year, the one who's been keeping his nose clean in Wyoming." "Yes, sir. And you're asking me to trust that this isn't some elaborate scheme to free a guilty man." "I'm asking you to look at the evidence, talk to the witnesses yourself if needed. Just give us time to prove the truth." Cooper was quiet for so long Cole thought he'd refuse. Then, "I'll ride back with you, if what you say bears out. I'll issue a stay pending formal review. But if this is deception—" "It's not," Cole said firmly. "I swear on my wife's life, it's not." They rode hard back to Leadville. Reaching town just as the sun peaked, the execution was scheduled for dawn the next day. Cooper immediately convened an emergency hearing in Sheriff Brennan's office. One by one, the witnesses told their stories. Lucy, courage bolstered by Clara's presence, described Garrison's assault. Samuel detailed the fight, emphasizing that Garrison drew the knife first. Other miners, emboldened by Lucy's bravery, spoke of Garrison's pattern of violence. The Garrison family lawyer protested, but Cooper silenced him with a look that could freeze flame. "It seems to me," Cooper said finally, "that crucial information was withheld from the jury, information that might well have changed their verdict." He turned to James. "Young man, I'm issuing a stay of execution pending a new trial. Given the evidence presented, I'm also recommending the territorial prosecutor review whether charges should stand at all." Clara gripped Cole's hand as James sagged with relief. It wasn't over. The Garrisons wouldn't give up easily, but it was hope. The new trial took place 3 weeks later in Denver, away from the Garrison family's immediate influence, with all evidence presented, including testimony from multiple witnesses about Garrison's history of violence. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Not guilty by reason of self-defense. James walked free on a crisp spring morning, blinking in sunlight he'd thought he'd never see again. Cole waited outside the courthouse, Clara beside him. The brothers embraced. 12 years of separation finally, truly ended. When they pulled apart, both had tears on their faces. "What now?" James asked. "I've got nothing, nowhere to go." "You've got family," Cole said firmly. "We've got room at the homestead while you figure things out. Clara's been talking about needing help with the medical practice, someone to run supplies, maintain equipment. You'd trust me with that." "Family trusts family," Clara said, linking her arm through James's. "That's what we do." They returned to Wyoming together, Cole, Clara, James, and Sheriff Walsh. The homestead that had sheltered 2 broken souls now opened its doors to a third, expanding the definition of family and home. Within 6 months, James had proved himself invaluable to Clara's practice, his gentle manner with patience balancing his brother's more intimidating presence. He built his own small cabin on the property, close enough for family, far enough for privacy. On the first anniversary of his near execution, James stood as witness when Cole and Clara renewed their vows in the small church. This time, the ceremony included a prayer of thanksgiving for second chances, for the law when it served justice, for the courage to fight with truth instead of violence. "You saved me," James said quietly to his brother afterward. "You and Clara both. We saved each other," Cole replied, watching his wife laugh with the church women who'd once whispered about her. That's what family does. The years that followed brought their trials hard winters, difficult births, the occasional echo of old violence. But they faced them together. The gunman who'd learned to fight with patience instead of bullets, the nurse who'd chosen love over respectability, and the brother who'd been given back his life. Their homestead grew into a small compound, Cole and Clara's house, James's cabin, a proper clinic building, stables for the horses Cole bred and trained. Children came to fill the spaces between buildings with laughter, though that's a story for another time. What matters is this: in the Wyoming Territory, where the wind still carries whispers of old violence and new beginnings, 3 people built something larger than their individual broken pieces. They built a family not just of blood, but of choice, held together by the kind of love that sees past scars to possibility. Cole never drew his gun in anger again. Though he kept it cleaned and ready, some habits die hard. Clara's practice grew until she needed 2 assistants, training other women in the medical arts. James found his own path, eventually marrying Lucy, who'd moved to Wyoming for that fresh start and building his own version of happiness. On quiet evenings, when the work was done and the fire burned low, Cole would pull Clara close and marvel at the life they'd built from such unlikely beginnings. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked once. "Following me that night, choosing this over what you could have had?" Clara smiled, touching the silver ring that had worn smooth with years but never lost its shine. "Never, not once. This is exactly where I was meant to be." And in the great book of Western stories, where tales of violence often overshadow tales of redemption, let it be written that sometimes the greatest courage isn't in the speed of a draw or the accuracy of a shot. Sometimes it's in the choice to stay, to build, to trust that broken people can create something whole together. Sometimes the best ending isn't riding into the sunset alone, but sitting on a porch with the one you love, watching the sun set over a life you built together, hand in hand, against all odds. Sometimes love wins, even in the Wild West, even for people who thought themselves too damaged for such grace. Sometimes love wins. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below where you are in the world as you enjoy these tales of the American frontier. If you enjoyed Clara and Cole's journey, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like, and don't forget to hit the hype button to help more people discover these stories of love, redemption, and second chances in the Old West. Your support means the world and helps me continue sharing these tales of the untamed frontier. Until next time, partners.